Well, only a few days ago, yes, days, I don't think it's up to weeks yet. Don't forget that the president of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, was in South Africa during the international export fair, trade fair, beg your pardon, trade fair. Is holding in that country, and Nigeria took a very heavy delegation to that international trade fair. He met with President Ramaphosa there. We do not know what was discussed between the two of them, even though we saw that there were very warm greetings. But now it would seem that we're expecting in Nigeria very soon, anytime now, we've been told before the end of November, the president of South Africa will be making a state visit to Nigeria, which is the highest official type of, they say it's different from an official visit, but it's the highest type of visit you can have from another visiting head of state. There'll be questions as to what this is about, what it is for. The Nigeria-South Africa relations have been bumpy for a while. And to shed a little more light on how we intend to continue to smoothen out relations is none other than His Excellency Tammy Mseleku, who is South Africa's High Commissioner to Nigeria. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it would seem that this has been a long time coming. Brothers who have been at each other, maybe very quietly, but it looks like peace is now the flag we're waving in the air. How did we get to this point?
Well, let me take you back to 2019, in fact. In 2019, President Buhari visited South Africa on a state visit for the inauguration of the binational commission between the two countries. This is a bilateral relationship which actually was launched in 1999. So it was the 9th binational meeting, but I'm saying it was being inaugurated at the presidential level in 2019 in October. And
just 2 years ago.
2 years ago. And as the name suggests, it's a biannual, binational commission. So now it's 2021, so it's the turn of Nigeria to actually host this meeting of the two countries at the presidential level. It's kind of a presidential summit between the two countries. And in fact, therefore, in terms of the formal relations since the demise of apartheid and the inauguration of the commission in 1999, this is in fact the 21st anniversary of this binational relationship, binational commission, and therefore that is why President Ramaphosa is actually coming to Nigeria.
Well, we're looking forward to that visit. I'm sure a lot of Nigerians, too, will be looking forward to the visit. For a number of them, we've seen in recent times how, I did mention, relationships have been not strained, but bumpy. But bumpy will be a more appropriate word to use, especially with regards to how Nigerians have been, yes, there's the perception of the treatment of Nigerians in South Africa and how the Nigerian government has responded to that. Are these issues also going to be coming up there as well?
Again, if I take you back to 2019, in fact, that meeting, that visit by President Buhari happened just after the September situation where many foreign nationals felt under attack from South African citizens, and Nigeria was one of the concerned parties, and in fact President Buhari came and actually discussed that matter, and there were quite a number of discussions in relation to specifically how we would actually manage these issues of Nigerians perhaps feeling under attack or being attacked in South Africa. And out of that came an agreement that we would establish what we call the early warning mechanism, so that both sides would be able to have a warning, because as a kind of reaction, I suppose, the South African businesses here in Nigeria also felt under attack as a result of that. So the agreement then established a possibility for the establishment of a mechanism called the early warning mechanism. unfortunately, because of COVID, the two parties couldn't really negotiate the content of that, the framework and how it would work. And so, just yesterday, in fact, the officials from the two parties, one of the issues they were discussing and trying to put together so that they could report to their senior officials in the meeting that starts tomorrow, in fact, no, today, in fact, and culminating in the ministerial meeting, which will actually take place on the 29th. And President Ramaphosa then lands on the 30th here with a state banquet, and then the meeting on the 1st of December. So that is one of the issues that will be actually signed, sealed, and finalized eventually as to how we manage these issues. Other than that, there are many other things that would actually be looked into.
It's interesting that the content of that particular early warning signals are now currently being worked out, and you're hoping that that'll be one of the deals that will be signed, sealed, and delivered, you know, after President or before he leaves Nigeria. But what more should we be looking forward to? South Africa just hosted this really amazing and fruitful, it would seem, international trade fair in the country, and lots of leaders were there. Nigerian leaders were there, past and present, as a matter of fact, where at that summit, and we understand that Nigeria made quite a showing in South Africa. I don't know, did South Africans feel, what's going on here? Why is Nigeria stand so big? Or was that of South Africa even bigger?
Let's start with the mission here in Nigeria. Okay. We were, both Lagos and Abuja were dealing with quite a number of visa applications for Nigerian businesses to get to South Africa. Toing and froing, it was actually a hectic process because it showed the interest of Nigerian business, not just in South Africa, but in African trade. And therefore, we're very grateful to the Nigerian business people who decided to go there in big numbers. And, you know, one of the things that actually happened, because as a sign again of the relationship between our two presidents. In fact, President Buhari at the time was going to move from Glasgow to Paris, and then our president picked up the phone and said, "Why are you not coming, my brother? I'm waiting for you." And so all of a sudden, President Buhari had decided, I am going. And we all ran around, both in South Africa and here, saying, how do we do this? Because it was within a period of about 4 or 5 days, the decision for him to go and land physically there. So what you saw was actually just an expression of how close the two presidents are.
That's very heartwarming to note. Just wondering, though, in terms of visa, as you just mentioned how busy or High Commission would have been, the High Commission here in Abuja and Lagos. Some people did experience some difficulty in getting visas to South Africa. And here we are talking about breaking down trade walls, barriers, you know, preventing and inhibiting intra-African trade. Is it something that both Nigeria and South Africa will be considering, perhaps making a lot easier, maybe not totally pulling down the wall, but at least making it easier for business people, for tourists? And I know that for a time, South Africa, the Tourist Commission was always advertising here in Nigeria, inviting would-be tourists to come and see South Africa. I haven't been there. I'd love to go there.
Please go. Please come.
But I'm wondering, I mean, if the hurdles for Nigerians to get a visa are quite high, the chances that they would want to apply, you know, might discourage them.
This is, again, is one of the ongoing discussions. In 2019, the delegation from Nigeria to the BNC raised some of the concerns. One of them was the turnaround time in our missions for the issuance of the visas. We had a backlog which was going back 3 months, 4 months, etc., etc.
That's remarkable.
Yes, and then we also had a situation where they were actually talking about the same issues that you're raising, of perhaps easing off a little bit here and there. And there were some agreements again in 2019 that were reached to try and deal with this. One of them was to actually enhance our capacity in the missions here to be able to fast-track the visa issuance. And the other was to actually look at the certain categories of groups like business people to be given longer-term visas so that they are not locked down with the system of visa issuance here. We were also envisaging that by now we would be moving to an e-visa system so that it would be done electronically and we would not have the kind of backlogs we had. Of course, most of these things were interrupted by the COVID period of 2020, and therefore things slowed down. And then just yesterday again, I talked about the early warning mechanism. This matter also was discussed by a special group talking about consular matters and immigration issues. And again, the Nigerian part of the delegation raised the issues as you are raising them. Can we relax here and so on? But part of the problem from our part as a mission which experienced this and as a country, we would love to be able to do that, and we're looking forward to free movement in Africa, and just like free trade, free movement of goods, free movement of people. We don't believe we're there yet because there are quite a number of issues that would have to be worked and really ironed out in order for us to be able to do that. But the biggest challenge we have here, we have a number of Nigerians who want to go to South Africa, and it doesn't go down because, as you say, the threshold is high. No, it actually is growing. The challenge, though, is that the majority, let me not say the majority, but a number of them are actually giving us documentation that cannot be credible. And when we have that kind of situation, it affects others because now we have to move to ensuring that each document is verified. If I can give an example now, you give me a bank statement. I have to go to the bank, your bank, to verify whether this is really authentic, because we have a number of these bank statements that are being produced, which are just being reproduced with just changing names here and there. That is the biggest challenge for us, for our immigration officials now, because they then have to be a little bit more circumspect when they look at documentation. If we could eliminate all those kinds of issues, it would be faster and quicker. It's not about the threshold. I believe that our thresholds are actually the same.
What about categories? I mean, there are countries in Africa that have been able to deal with, they've been able to categorize and say, if you're coming for a business visa, this is how long it will take, this is documentation you'll need. If you're a tourist, you're not staying more than this number of days, this is documentation you'll need. Some even give visa on arrival. You get there, you have the name of your hotel, you pay for your visa when you get to the country. And you go, you do your stuff, and then you come out in 2 weeks. Are these solutions that, South Africa, for instance, more specifically, because I imagine a number of African nations should be thinking about this, but are these solutions that South Africa will be looking to at least differentiate, will I say sift those who truly want to go and add value to Nigeria's relationship with South Africa from those who you think, could make our relationship bumpy once again?
No, as I said, that was one of the issues that was raised in 2019, and there were agreements about how to do that, particularly starting with people who are going to do business, who are business people, investors, frequent travelers, and so on. One of the issues was, let's get them out of this system of having to come back for a visa time and again, at least for a period of up to about 10 years. So we had agreed, and we had agreed on how to do that. As I say, the challenge was both sides, because on the one hand, the Nigerian government, particularly Foreign Affairs, was actually supposed to say, okay, give us a database of those people that you actually believe are deserving of this kind of thing. Similarly, the missions here, we also interact with quite a number of businesses, and we understand what is the business leadership position here. So we were both supposed to be putting together that kind of database and then saying to these people, let's actually deal with you differently and get you out of the system so that you're not bogged down by these kinds of things that are there. Now, that in itself was going to actually solve part of the problem, but we haven't been able to implement it, both sides. And we agreed yesterday that we need to actually go back to why it's actually happening that we didn't do that. So that's the kind of categorization you're talking about. You talked earlier on about our South African tourism doing promotion here. In fact, it was actually doing one promotion in our Pick and Pay stores in Lagos for the Christmas period. They're busy doing that. But sometimes you see, even within us, there's that tension between that promotion and these other issues, which then make even the South African tourism side wonder what we are doing as the missions to support them. So that conversation is an ongoing conversation to say, how do we actually deal with these genuine tourists who actually come through? We're also looking at agencies so that we're sure that tourist agencies, some of them take responsibility for the people they bring to us because that's their reputation too. So we had a number of strategies for that categorization. The challenge, as I say, is that the implementation as such is now only starting to kick off, because after 2020, of course, the countries were closed. Even Nigeria was closed to South Africa. There were no South African flights allowed here. So, yes, those categorizations are there in the pipeline.
So these are some of the expectations and some of the things that Nigerians will be hoping that, will be brought to the table in this conversation. However, I'm sure the South African side will also have some requests and some expectations from the Nigerian side as well. Could you tell us some of the things that perhaps you've been told from South Africa that you'll also have to be pushing when the two presidents eventually meet?
Look, for us as South Africa, there are really two or three things. The main one being that we want together, as Nigeria, South Africa, to ensure that the Africa Free Trade Agreement succeeds. So conversations between the two countries center around how to make that happen, because these are the two big economies, and therefore they should actually show leadership in that. If they don't, then that agreement will not be worth the paper it's written on. So that's the first thing that we're actually looking at. Another thing is, of course, you like in any country, there are issues between the businesses that actually come into the country and the environment, the business environment in the country. So from time to time, we have issues from our own business people. In fact, some of them, some of our companies end up deciding to withdraw from this market because both of their own challenges, but of the challenges of the market. So while we talk to them about the fact that it is also your responsibility to do proper market analysis, but we also have some issues about how they actually get engaged with regard to the market and market barriers. And so some of those issues will arise, but for us they are not major issues. The more important thing is the relationship between the two countries to ensure that the African agenda, and particularly the Africa Free Trade Agreement, are actually implemented, because we believe that the relationship between these two countries, you described it as bumpy. Yes, it's been bumpy. That's why we want to level those bumps so that we actually look beyond the social issues. Whenever I'm in any place and people are talking about Nigeria, South Africa, they will say, hey, by the way, how Nigerians are treated and so on. Then I'll start saying, well, let's be serious. Is that true or not true? I want to go beyond that now, because really we're not going anywhere. We have mechanisms to deal with those issues. But the more important thing is that we are African brothers and sisters, and we are the leading economies in this continent. Without us, we will have a problem in the continent. Nigeria plays a very critical role in the continent in general, in West Africa in particular. So we really need one another. Indeed.
Well, let's quickly take this conversation now to Lagos. My colleague Ayo has a few questions for you.
Well, thank you, Malkwe. Your Excellency, let me begin with this analogy that I heard many years ago, that Nigeria and South Africa are like parts of a gun. Nigeria is seen as the trigger, and South Africa as a country is seen as the muzzle of the gun. And I'm wondering how very effectively we'll be able to do that as two nations, especially since you have also mentioned the importance of Nigeria and South Africa on the continent and certainly in the world. But I want to speak specifically to the young population. In terms of employment for, young South Africans and young Nigerians, in what ways do you expect or do you think both countries should be collaborating? Because most certainly, unless we build the capacity of the young people, we are definitely only building for today. We are not building for the future. So in what ways do you see partnerships coming along in that aspect of our lives as two different nations? What kind of partnerships are you looking at in that regard?
We have a very interesting, both fortunate and unfortunate analogy, because the question is who's then carrying the gun to pull the trigger. We will have to get into that and really analyze very carefully if we are the gun, who's holding us. But we want to be the holders of the gun if we still want to use that analogy. But let me go to your question, very, very important question. One of the issues we agreed upon in 2019, or even before then, between the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of International Relations in South Africa, was that we need to get our young people themselves to start talking to each other so that they can actually map out what they want to do in collaboration with one another, together in various ways. And they begin to understand where they are coming from as young people of the two countries. So one of the agreements that is going to be signed during this visit is an agreement on the youth dialogue. It's the broad agreement about youth cooperation, but the agreement on the youth dialogue, in fact, the launch of the youth dialogue, which actually is establishing a dialogic mechanism between South African young people and Nigerian young people. They are already collaborating in various ways, particularly in the arts, in film, in music. I'm sure Davido is more famous in South Africa than in Nigeria, and DJ Coffee is more famous in Nigeria than in South Africa. So there's quite a lot of collaboration in relation to these young people. And of course, we know the arts create a lot of jobs. But you're talking about skills development. We are also trying to ensure that our institutions of higher education collaborate, because the foundational elements of job creation, the foundational elements of creating employment is upskilling our young people and developing entrepreneurship capacity among them. So part of that is in relation to the collaboration between our higher education institutions, and that is also one of the issues that is looked at in this youth dialogue.
Well, we'll definitely want to explore just one more question because we need to take a short break now. When we return, I'd like to ask you something that you have referenced earlier, but it's been very, very low. Okay, I understand we do not have a break. So let me take this. Now, trade, intra-Africa trade has been very low for so many years as opposed to international, trade with other countries and all of that. And there are a number of them, Western nations, European countries, all coming to Africa, speaking with different African nations to see how they can collaborate, do business with African nations, not essentially as Africa, but African nations. Now, you have referenced after the other time, and there are a number of people who will be wondering how Africans will collaborate such that we can so strengthen our ranks as a continent that it'll be difficult to break, because you know that it's easier for any head of state from any other part of the world to come talk to any African, head of state with little resistance, if I can use that term. The strength of France, for instance, on its former colonial nations is still considered to be very, very strong, as that of so many other countries that were colonial enclaves for some nations before now. So in terms of strengthening the African bond and raising the stakes of intra-Africa trade, with or without AFTA, because I know that AFTA is supposed to do that, what do you think we need to do? Create economic hubs, you know, from different regions. Exactly what do you think we need to do to strengthen that bond, and how can this visit help that agenda?
Let me say I really agree with you, first and foremost, that with or without the Africa Trade Agreement, Africa should have done this a long time ago. And you'll remember that our leadership did actually recognize this and started looking at what are the barriers to this trade. One of the key barriers was the issue of interconnectivity, infrastructure for connectivity, for free trade, the flow of goods, etc., within the African continent. I was laughing there just yesterday when I saw one of my ministers who's supposed to be arriving here on the 28th via France, and I was saying, why did you have to go to Paris to actually come to Nigeria? But these are the indications of things that we still need to do to ensure that we actually can interconnect and have inter-movement. But you're talking at the level of the leadership. One of the key issues, of course, is that we in Africa now are needing to rebuild that leadership, which we actually began to experience during the era of the Thabo Mbekis, the former President Obasanjo here, and the Algerian president, and some of the key presidents that were trying to actually pull this thing together and respond to your question. Hence the development of the NEPAD program and the argument that when we speak to other nations, we speak as Africans, and therefore we must not allow people to divide us. Of course, it seemed that aspect has actually met challenges, and we're trying to rebuild them. We're trying to actually get back to that by getting the bonds once again in the relationship, starting with the relationship between South Africa and Nigeria, so that the leadership can then provide that leadership. But President Ramaphosa started deliberately by coming to Nigeria in his visit in the West African, 3 or 4 other countries that he's actually visiting. It was important for him to actually come to Nigeria to build that bond, and then he moves to Cote d'Ivoire, as you say, a French-speaking West African country. For the first time, we're trying to actually have a conversation that is at the highest level with a country like that, on the advice also of Nigeria and the president of Nigeria. He then moves to Ghana, which is your neighbor here, and finally to Senegal. We are trying to begin to actually move away from this notion that there's the French and the English. We are Africans. And one of the things, of course, this is a personal pet subject of mine, is we actually have to do away with these notions of the French-speaking, the Portuguese-speaking. How do we do that? If we start by promoting our own languages that are uniting us, then we won't talk about the French-speaking, what we'll talk about. I'm looking forward to a time when I'll say the Hausa-speaking West Africa rather than the French-speaking West Africa, because that's what really reinforces this notion of colonial or neo-colonialism.
Indeed, I imagine that, you know, there will be many years to go. I am hoping that the years will be far closer and tighter for those walls to be broken down amongst Africans, and for us to see ourselves as Africans first. I mean, even in Nigeria, we're still dealing with issues of unity, according to our motto, and we're still trying our best to see how we can find common ground or strengthen the common ground that we found so far. And while that is going on, we certainly cannot dismiss the fact that we must seek ways to continue to unite on the continent and break down barriers. So we look forward to this visit. despite COVID, and we're seeing now that South Africa has found a fourth.
Please don't mention that.
I shouldn't, right? But who knows? We might be sharing lessons on how you've been able to deal with it, and what we can learn from it. And hopefully that will not be one of the hard points, but let us hope that eventually, we'll be able to defeat the pandemic on the whole. Yes. We have to thank you very much for coming on Sunrise Sunday this morning. His Excellency Tammy Misaleko is South Africa's High Commissioner to Nigeria. He has been speaking with us on the proposed or the upcoming state visit of President Ramaphosa to Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming once again.
Thank you, ma'am.
We'll take a break at this point. When we come back, we'll be sinking our teeth into issues of the economy. Please stay with us.